I reached out to her, and I reached out through a number of people, including some relatives of mine who are very, very close to her personally and to the Democratic Party, and they just said, that's a non-starter. There's no way in the world that she's going to talk to you. And they said, we can get you a meeting with a low-level campaign official.
So today, RFK Jr. went on Tucker Carlson to explain how this all happened, right? How the endorsement and partnership with Donald Trump actually came to be. And it may not be the timeline that some of you would expect. So it's very interesting. We'll talk about it here today, folks. But first, if you enjoy the content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are new. And that said, let's get into this because I find it to be very interesting in terms of telling the type of person that Donald Trump is, that RFK is, and specifically the type of campaign that Trump is running and why that might make a huge difference come November 5th. So that said, let's check it out.
That, I had these meetings with President Trump, and they were partly because of you. You were the one who, Callie Means called me about, I'd say 3 hours after President Trump was shot. Callie Means called, although it doesn't seem possible because, but I think it was only 3 hours after his shooting. And
it was Saturday night.
Yeah, Saturday night. And Callie Means said to me, he told me, Callie had been advising me for a long time and my campaign. He told me that night, I've also been, I've been advising President Trump, which delighted me because I thought, oh my gosh, there's another candidate beside me that is listening to the truth. And he said that there was interest in the Trump campaign by the president of including me. And then he talked about vice president, which I wasn't interested in. But he said, would you be interested in talking with with President Trump? And I said, I don't think so. And part of this was I just thought it was a non-starter with Cheryl. And I called Cheryl up, and she said to me, you should hear them out. And I immediately called Callie. I texted Callie back and said, I'm interested.
So that's very interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, it was actually Trump that reached out to RFK first and not the other way around. I think you can obviously see in hindsight that was smart political judgment from Trump. But at the same time, of course, a lot of people, the common Democrat excuse about this has been RFK was always going to endorse Trump. This was inevitable to happen. He's just like them. He's the crazy right-winger. But listen to what RFK said. Initially, when the Trump campaign reached out to talk with him or work with him, he said he personally was not interested. This was not something that was inevitable to happen or likely to happen, but it seems like shortly after the assassination attempt, the timeline here sort of all fell into place. So to some degree, we're lucky. I don't know if you want to use that word, but hey, it played out the way it played out, and I'm very happy to hear that all happening. But we'll talk more about it. Let's keep listening.
And then I got a text from you, and you and I have each other's cell phones, and you had an unknown cell phone number, which you had linked me into, which was President Trump's number. And you said, he's waiting for your call. And so I called him that night. I had a great conversation with him. And then he asked, well, we decided to talk. And I met him the next day. He was at that point at Bedminster, which is his golf course and home in New Jersey. And he'd driven there from Butler, where he had been shot. And then I went to, and so I flew out to Minneapolis the next day. And I had probably a 2-hour meeting with him and Amaryllis, who's my daughter-in-law, who is running my campaign, the smartest person I've ever met, and Cheryl and Susie Wiles. And it was a really interesting meeting because he was so open about first of all, not liking the neocons.
Yeah.
And, I never imagined that because for me, he was the guy who brought John Bolton and Mike Pompeo into office. And, but he was, really disillusioned with them, to say the least, And then, he was deeply interested and well informed, as he is on any, as much as he is on any subject, about what's happening to our kids, chronic disease.
So that's also very telling. Obviously, it's a good thing that Trump is concerned with our kids and the chronic disease stuff that RFK talks about, but also very disillusioned, very upset with the neocons. And I think that says a lot about where a second Trump term would be headed. Probably a big reason he met with RFK Jr. to begin with, because I can tell you, most people understand, okay, it's good for the election at least. We agree the base certainly likes RFK Jr., and you saw that at the Trump rally in Arizona, but there are definitely people within the Republican Party that do not like RFK. They do not like the fact that he calls out the uniparty, because there's obviously many uniparty Republicans, just as many as there are Democrats, but that tells you a lot about where Trump's current political instincts are. And again, the fact that it was Trump's idea to do this, such a big decision in retrospect, and glad to see they're talking to each other. Also worth noting, Tucker Carlson is the very person who apparently put them in touch. So shout out to Tucker for doing that. People always make fun of the fact that Trump just listens to Fox News hosts, or I guess in this case, former Fox News hosts. But hey, that was actually smart in this instance, right?
And then he was absolutely adamant about stopping the censorship and, and making sure that we had free speech. And so we talked a little then, and didn't really come to any, talked about the possibility of working together after that. But then we put it on hold. They wanted me to do something at the convention. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And we still, at that point, there was still a chance that I could get into the debate. That chance was diminishing. And because I was not allowed on any media, and because, my only chance of winning the election, I believe I would have won if I had gotten on the debate stage. But my only chance was to get on the debate stage. And that possibility was vanishing. And so I was looking at kind of my options. I then contacted Harris's campaign because I thought...
So again, just one more time, there's obviously the crowd of people, especially Democrats, who say this was inevitable. They were always going to work together. It was a controlled op, whatever you want to say. But it seems very obvious to me this at one point was actually very improbable to happen. But the Democrats and the political establishment pushed him around too much, and they were arrogant to think it wouldn't matter, it wouldn't make a difference. And eventually, Kennedy didn't want to work with Trump. He actually didn't, but he reached a point where he realized it's the only way forward. It might be the necessary and smart thing to do. And that's very telling. Again, remember this, the arrogance of the Democrats when RFK talks about the conversations he tried to have respectively with Kamala Harris. Check it out.
Looking at kind of my options, I then contacted Harris's campaign because I thought I should talk to them and see if they're interested in any of these issues, which I suspected they were not, because Kamala was still an empty slate. Kamala, was an empty slate. So,
she's pronounced it both ways herself, so it's okay.
I want to respect people and give them,
yes.
So I reached out to her, and I reached out through a number of people, including some relatives of mine who are very, very close to her personally and to the Democratic Party. And they just said, that's a non-starter. There's no way in the world that she's going to talk to you. And they said, we can get you a meeting with a low-level campaign official. And I said, okay, I'm not interested in that.
Why wouldn't, it's interesting, why wouldn't Kamala Harris meet with you?
Maybe the same reason that she hasn't given an interview. I think it seems to me that there's a lot of handlers involved. And even when you talk to Democrats about, do you really think it's a good idea to be electing somebody who cannot give an interview? They say, well, you're not electing her, you're electing the people around her, you're electing the apparatus. and the apparatus. But the apparatus, an apparatus I don't have any faith in. It's an apparatus running that are neocons like, like Anthony Blinken and who are, running us right up into a World War III.
Exactly.
And
that's certainly true. But you know what? I'll give an alternative explanation as to why Kamala Harris and the Democrats, because you didn't even have to meet with Kamala necessarily. You could have met with a campaign official or someone in charge, right? But the reason is because they are running a fundamentally arrogant and cocky campaign. And this is the big difference between Donald Trump and the Democrat strategy, which may make the difference. I really do believe this in the election, which is the Democrats looked at RFK Jr. and thought to themselves, okay, maybe we have an in there possibly. I mean, it is his lifelong party, whatever. But you know what? We're not even going to try. We're not even going to bother to speak to him. He's irrelevant. He's a conspiracy theorist. Who even cares about this? Screw him. And they just assume that RFK dropping out and giving his few percentage points to Trump will not make a difference in the election, which is something that certainly mathematically could come back to bite them, because if Trump just gets 1 to 2 extra percent in any of these swing states, he very likely wins there. But again, Democrats just thought it was not necessary. And that is much bigger than RFK. As a whole, Kamala Harris is running a fundamentally arrogant campaign. You look at some of the things they've done. The fact that they refused to do a TV interview. Yes, is it partially true that, she just is not good off the teleprompter and they know the media might accidentally embarrass her? That is certainly the case. But I think at the same time, they truly believe they do not need to do this, right? They do not need to do interviews because it doesn't matter. Doesn't make a big difference. They don't need to announce a real policy platform. They don't need to speak to RFK. They don't need to do their convention in a swing state, because remember that fact. They did it in Chicago, whereas the Republicans did theirs in Milwaukee, right? In Wisconsin, a state that's actually going to matter. But my firm belief is that when you contrast this with the strategy of the Trump campaign, which is essentially do everything we can to win the most votes possible, even the little things, right? Speaking at the Libertarian Convention, speaking at the Bitcoin conference, doing these interviews with random YouTube streamers, right? Things that, yes, the Democrats would say, and it's true, in the grand scheme of things, don't make the biggest difference in the election. But the point is, you keep chasing small amounts of votes here and there. In the end, in a close election, which this almost inevitably will be, that could be the deciding factor that makes the difference. And so I'm certainly not rooting for Kamala Harris. I think it's a good thing that Democrats are this cocky and just are not focused on the little details here. But it is pretty telling on their part, because if they maybe just met with RFK Jr., maybe just showed him some respect, were a little bit nice to him, there is a possibility, I'm not saying a strong one, but a possibility he could still be in this race and still taking voters away from Trump. But again, they didn't even bother to pick up the phone, and their hubris and arrogance may come back to bite them in November. That said, let me know your thoughts on this interview in the comment section down below. And do you agree with my assessment that the Democrat arrogance in this campaign could come back to bite them? Let me know. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.